Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. The RBA Governor, Dr Lowe, told the National Press Club, and I quote, "When the JobKeeper program finishes at the end of March, we expect some additional job losses." The Secretary of the Treasury also conceded last week that there will be job losses when JobKeeper is axed. How many Australians will lose their jobs when the government axes JobKeeper in 38 days?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, the government has always been honest that in dealing with a global pandemic, with a crisis of unprecedented proportions in terms of its economic impact right around the world, that tragically not every job or every business would be able to be saved from the disruption that has occurred. The actions, however, that we've taken have delivered a remarkable outcome for Australia in terms of saving jobs, saving businesses and indeed ensuring our economy is firmly back on track and progressing in a direction that we want to see around its recovery. And indeed, today we welcome labour force figures released that show yet again a decline in the unemployment rate in Australia. That in January the unemployment rate fell.
Order. Senator Gallagher on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr President. Point of order is relevance. I'm sure the government has the opportunity through Dorothy's to go through the jobs data today, and I'll be surprised, but unless they surprise me. But my question was specifically about job losses, and the minister hasn't come to that, including how many will be lost when JobKeeper ends.
Thank you, Senator Gallagher. I've allowed you to restate the final part of the question. The question did refer, and the quotations, to jobs and the labour market, and I think the minister, with respect, is being directly relevant by talking about jobs. I can't instruct him how to answer a question. Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr President, I hate to break it to the Shadow Minister for Finance, but the measure of unemployment by the Australian Bureau of Statistics is a measure of people without jobs in the Australian economy. And what we saw in January was the unemployment rate fell from 6.6% to 6.4%. More importantly, Mr President, employment increased by 29,100 additional jobs in January 2021, the fourth monthly increase in a row, Mr President. Now, Mr President, this is a government that has quite consistently supported people through the pandemic, but also acted in a way consistent with principles, where we said that measures we put in place would have to be temporary, targeted and proportionate to the circumstances that are there. That's what we've done with JobKeeper. We absolutely delivered an economy-wide solution at the point of the pandemic's depths. We have tapered it off, and we are now, thanks to the recovery that's in place, able to move to more targeted
Senator
approaches.
Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Mr President, I note the minister avoids answering the question. My supplementary, Save Victorian Events, a group advocating for Victoria's $10 billion a year events industry, performed a survey earlier this month that found if JobKeeper ends in March, 43% of companies surveyed will need to let staff go, and an additional 40% will potentially need to close their businesses. How many of the 493,000 businesses accessing JobKeeper will fold due to this government withdrawing support prematurely?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President. Well, I reject the idea, any concept of premature withdrawal. What this government has done is to put in place an intervention in the Australian economy and in private businesses unprecedented in its scale. The scale of investment that we have put into the Australian economy has been unprecedented in terms of its scale, the dollars involved and the nature of the intervention that was put there. And of course, as we tightened the eligibility for JobKeeper, as the rates around JobKeeper declined, those opposite came in here each time and predicted doom and gloom. They told us that at the end of September, we would see catastrophe. At the end of December, we would see catastrophe. And yet what we've seen is the Australian economy has continued to grow the number of jobs. The unemployment rate has continued to go down. Now, there will be difficult times ahead, no doubt about it. but our measures have worked and are working.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. The National Australia Bank has joined the chorus of economists and experts warning against prematurely abandoning support, saying, and I quote, "It is critical that while support will be loosened in better performing parts of the economy, the overall stimulus package is not withdrawn too quickly." Why is the Prime Minister withdrawing support without any plan for businesses to stay open and workers to keep their jobs?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Senator Gallagher clearly wasn't listening when the last budget was handed down, because there is an enormous amount of support, stimulus and activity still going into the Australian economy, even past the end of March. The measures put in place to stimulate investment across the Australian economy, the Home Builder program that is providing a huge wave of activity in the construction sector, the tax cuts that we've legislated that are providing for an additional $1 billion plus going into the pockets of Australian households each and every month going forward, the fact that we have got in place the loss carryback provisions for Australian businesses to be able to sustain themselves, all of these measures are ongoing. All of these measures are ongoing past the end of March. Now, we do not shy away from the fact there are difficult times for certain businesses. We are working through consultation with them. We will look at targeted approaches. But, Mr President, we are seeing an economic response in Australia.
Order. Senator Abetz.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck. Can the Minister update the Senate on the latest developments in the plan to roll out the COVID vaccine, which has a priority focus on Australians most at risk from this crippling virus, including in our home state of Tasmania?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Betts, for your question. Rolling out the COVID vaccine across Australia is one of the government's highest priorities. The country is on track for the first and most vulnerable of Australians to start receiving the vaccine from Monday, Mr President. Senator Betts, I'm pleased to inform the Senate that there are 16 Pfizer vaccination hubs across Australia, including in our home state at the Royal Hobart Hospital. Thousands of aged care residents in Australia at more than 240 facilities will receive their first COVID-19 vaccine dose next week. The facilities are located across Australia in over 190 towns and suburbs, in rural and urban areas, in every state and country. Next week, in our home state of Tasmania, Mr President, Senator Abetz, rollout of the vaccines will occur in aged care facilities in Burnie, Legana, Newnham, Newstead, Norwood, Penguin, Riverside, Somerset, St Leonards, Ulverston and Wynyard, Mr President. Of the 142,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine which arrived into the country this week, approximately 80,000 doses will be released next week. Approximately 30,000 vaccines will be made available for the Commonwealth Vaccine In-Reach workforce to aged care and disability care residents. Information has been sent out to aged care facilities for residents, their families, carers and loved ones about what to expect in the lead-up to and on vaccination day. The Department of Health has sent a readiness toolkit to aged care facilities, including clinical requirements and a checklist for vaccination day.
Senator Abetz, a supplementary question.
Thanks for that good news. And I ask further, can the Minister outline the government's plan to ensure all Australians are aware of how and when to access the vaccine?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Senator Abetz. Mr President, we are investing $31 million on a public information campaign to keep Australians up to date about the COVID-19 vaccines as they become available and when, how and where to get the jab. As part of our public information campaign, we're investing an additional $1.3 million for peak multicultural organisations to help reach culturally and linguistically diverse communities. The campaign will run across a number of channels, including regular website updates, social media, health professionals, local community and grassroots organisations, networks, and the mainstream media, Mr President. And will include advertising in 32 languages across radio, print and social media, extending to communities that are harder to reach through traditional channels.
Order.
Our message,
Senator Colbeck,
Mr President—
time for the answer has expired. Senator Abetz, a final supplementary question.
Can the minister also provide an update on how the vaccine rollout will assist with the government's plan for economic recovery?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Senator Abetz. With our economic recovery well underway, Australians can have cause for optimism and hope as we emerge from COVID. Vaccinating Australians against this virus will go a long way to rebuilding confidence in the Australian economy. While we'll always be guided by the best in medical advice from our experts, we know that reducing the risk of COVID through vaccination will result in Australians moving more freely back to work, back to retail and back to supporting our domestic tourism and hospitality sectors. Mr President, our nation has performed and outperformed all major advanced nations with a larger proportion of Australians who were in the workforce before this crisis in work today. This was due to support programs we put in place, which were only possible because we entered this crisis 12 months ago in a position of economic strength.
Senator McAllister.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. This morning, Peter Van Onselen revealed that in response to Ms Higgins going public about her alleged rape in Minister Reynolds' office, that, and I quote, the Prime Minister's office has been backgrounding that her now partner has a vendetta or a gripe against the government. Mr Van Onselen labelled the tactics of the Prime Minister's office as, and I quote, grubby. Does the minister agree that backgrounding against Ms Higgins to delegitimise her experience would be grubby? And does the Morrison government accept that Ms Higgins' claims of rape and her experience of feeling pressured not to report it should be believed?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, in relation to Ms Higgins's very distressing claims of sexual assault and rape, as Minister Reynolds informed the Senate at the commencement, it has always been the intent of the government to support her and to enable her to make whatever decisions she chooses to make, and that continues to be the position of the government. It's for those reasons that Minister Reynolds and her then Chief of Staff facilitated meetings for Ms Higgins with the police in early 2019, and indeed why parliamentary services and others provided police with access to information, to the CCTV
Order.
footage within this building. Now, in relation to the claims in the first part of the Senator's question, I have no awareness of any such activity being undertaken.
Senator McAllister, a supplementary question.
Will the Prime Minister investigate the claims that his staff are backgrounding journalists against Ms Higgins? If the claims are proved, what consequences will there be for this conduct?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Senator, through you, Mr President, Senator, I will take those matters up with the Prime Minister. I am certain that he has no tolerance for such activities.
Senator McAllister, a final supplementary question.
I would appreciate
Order.
a response to my question, to my supplementary question, once you've taken it up with the Prime Minister. Yesterday, Ms Higgins said, and I quote, "The continued victim-blaming rhetoric by the Prime Minister is personally very distressing to me and countless other survivors." When will Mr Morrison stop victim-blaming and be straight about the conduct of his government?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, the government wants nothing more that in relation to Ms Higgins, for her to be able to make the decisions she chooses to make in relation to whether she takes these matters forward with police, and the government will provide absolutely full cooperation in that regard, as we would have and have had at any point of time in the past. We will continue to provide that support. In relation to the systemic issues in place, my office, consistent with what the Prime Minister has announced, has now reached out across all party lines, groupings and independents to arrange for discussions that I will undertake over coming days to enable us to pursue a true multi-party independent approach to ensure that across this building, regardless of the political party that an individual may work for, they can have confidence in the systems and processes that are in place to support them.
Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. My question is to you regarding Brittany Higgins's rape allegations. Did you or your staff tell the Prime Minister or any of his staff or any other members of the ministry that a request to DPS had been made on the 18th of April 2019 by the Sexual Assault Unit of the AFP, seeking access to the CCTV footage of the evening of Brittany Higgins's alleged rape? If so, when?
Can I commence, Senator Waters, by saying for the first time this week in this place that I struggle to find the words, be they formal or informal, to fully express my sorrow, occasionally frustration and anger at what has occurred in this workplace, the alleged sexual assault. It's occurred on my watch as a senator and indeed as a custodian of this place. At all times, I have acted to the best of my ability to assist any process that will help Brittany Higgins, whose identity I was not aware of until last Friday, find justice without further suffering and with her own ability to choose her course of action. The Speaker and I have answered a number of queries this week and issued a statement yesterday. I think senators will appreciate the building is jointly administered by the Speaker and myself. We followed the procedures. The Federal Police requested viewing of the footage. They saw that footage. With their agreement, we continued to store that footage since that time. When we received anonymous and serious allegations, we referred those to the AFP, and we then, following that, commissioned our own independent inquiry into the actions of staff in this building. Now, I think it's appropriate, I should add, to clarify that neither of the presiding officers, myself nor the Speaker, has viewed the footage. The footage in question has only been viewed by members of the AFP, authorised officials from the Department of Parliamentary Services and the independent investigator. We have not provided any footage access to any parliamentarian or member of staff. Now, I don't plan to say any more at this point because it is a courtesy to the Speaker as a joint administrator of the building that I should consult with him, and I will come back to the chamber and, if necessary, consult the authorities before I add anything in this chamber that may inadvertently interfere with an investigation underway.
Thanks very much, President. Noting your comments, I will persist with supplementary questions, and I might also ask that you answer the first question about whether you told the Prime Minister or his staff or any other members of the ministry that DPS had received a request from the assault unit of the AFP. I refer to that statement yesterday. Did you or any of your staff tell the PM or any of his staff or members of the ministry when that unnamed senator referred the correspondence to you about a serious incident in March 2020?
I will come back to the chamber after consulting with the Speaker. As I said, we jointly administer the building. And it's a courtesy and appropriate, I think, that I consult with him.
Thank you, President. Brittany Higgins has a final supplementary. Brittany Higgins has said that she was repeatedly denied access to the CCTV footage showing she and her alleged rapist entering the building and Minister Reynolds' suite. Did her request to release the footage to her ever make it to you? And if so, why was that request denied?
The footage was requested by the AFP, and the process of doing that is outlined in a policy of this place. It was quarantined and then stored for the AFP to view. As far as I am aware, there was no request from Brittany to see the footage that came to the presiding officers. But I will again come back to the chamber and correct that or provide further information. Sorry. Yes, sorry, Senator Waters.
My question was not so much did the request come directly from her as did a request on her behalf make it to you. There's a subtle but important difference there.
I received, again, I will confirm, but we have checked and I have received no request from Brittany Higgins. Or Senator Waters.
Is what I'm asking.
So, well, I'll look at the Hansard and I will come back. I think it's entirely appropriate that I be precise. Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence and relates to the future frigate program. In June 2018, the Type 26 was announced as the basis for what we now know as the Hunter-class frigate, with claims of large-scale job creation, work for Australian industry and a schedule that was fundamental to establishing the naval shipbuilding program. Real Australian suppliers, as opposed to local shopfronts for foreign industry, remain of the view that the opportunities they expected to be able to compete for are being pushed to BAE's systems standard suppliers in the UK and shopfronts here. What action is the government taking to ensure all Australian owned and controlled suppliers are being offered full and fair access to work packages for the project?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Patrick for the question, and I also thank you for the courtesy of prior notice, particularly in the circumstances. More than 1,300 Australian companies have pre-qualified for inclusion in the BAE Systems at Maritime Australia Hunter project supply chain. We already have contracts with BlueScope for Australian steel. Here are just some of the great Australian businesses working on the Hunter. Indigenous business TQCSI Yarran, InfraBuild Steel Centre, APS Adelaide Profile Services, Intertech Adelaide Inspection Services and MG Engineering. The Hunter-class frigate program will achieve a minimum of 58% Australian industry content, with a target Australian industry content of over 60%. This means Australian jobs, skills and growing our sovereign industrial capability. There are already over 1,000 Australians working on the Hunter-class frigate program, which will grow to 2,200 at the program's peak in the late 2020s. As design of the Hunter progresses, even more work packages will be released to Australian industry in both the build and in the sustainment phases. Already companies such as Voxon Photonics have won work with BAE Systems to support naval research in Australia and in the UK. But of course, our targets for Australian industry content are not set and forget. We are maximising Australian industry content across naval shipbuilding and have established a robust Australian industry assurance program to ensure that Australian businesses are afforded every possible opportunity.
Senator Patrick, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The government mandated the use of Australian steel in the Hunter-class project, a very good decision. So it clearly can be done, mandating. So what criteria must be met by the government for it to stand and intervene in respect of utilisation of non-shopfront, real Australian company industry capability?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and again thank you, Senator Patrick, for the question. I can say I'm incredibly proud to be part of a government that is unashamedly backing Australian industry. From 2013, this government took a stand to rebuild our Australian naval shipbuilding industry. In the 2024 structure plan, we committed to build more than 70 naval vessels right here in Australia. And a key part of strengthening our sovereign industrial base will involve working with trusted partners and suppliers, particularly where Australia is growing and developing capability. Our collaboration with international suppliers is helping build Australian capacity and also our sovereign capability. These companies are establishing uniquely Australian subsidiaries that are doing a number of things, including transferring skills and know-how to Australia, employing thousands and thousands of Australians, and exporting Australian-built cutting-edge capability to the world.
Senator Patrick, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. At budget estimates last year, despite the project having an underspend, which can be an indication that things aren't progressing as quickly as possible, the Minister and department officials advised that the project was proceeding according to schedule. Can the Minister confirm that the Hunter project is proceeding to plan and remains on schedule, both in respect of past milestones and immediately pending milestones? And can you advise on what basis that assessment is made?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much. And Senator Patrick, you'll be glad to know, through you, Mr President, that the answer is yes. The Hunter-class frigate project remains on track to meet government and Navy requirements. Design activities are well underway and we commenced prototyping in December 2020 on time and as planned. The next design milestone, systems definition review, will occur between March and November next year, and we remain on track to cut steel in 2022.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Businesses, Senator Cash. Could the Minister please update the Senate on the state of the labour market following today's ABS labour force figures and how the Morrison government is supporting Australia's economic recovery through strong economic policy?
The Minister for Employment, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator McGrath for the question. And, Mr President, indeed today the labour force figures were released by the ABS for January 2021. And what they show is that the Australian labour market is continuing to recover in January 2021 from the effects of COVID-19. What we actually saw today was employment increased by 29,100 over the month. And when you look at that figure, it is not just a figure. This is Australians who are getting into work, and that is what this government is all about, putting in place the right economic policies to ensure that businesses are able to keep their employees employed, or now as we move into the next phase, bring on additional employees into their workplaces. We saw the unemployment rate decrease from 6.6% to 6.4%, and encouragingly, the increase in employment over the month of January was due entirely to a rise in full-time jobs, which surged by 59,000 in January. And in fact, Mr President, over the last 4 consecutive months now, we've seen full-time employment rise. In fact, it's a total of 277,600 to now stand at 8,820,400 in January 2021. And certainly I know Minister Payne has commented to me that encouragingly full-time employment for women rose strongly over the month, and it was up 32,100. Mr President, while employment itself fell by 872,100 between March, when Australia recorded its 100th case of COVID-19, and May, it has since increased by 813,600 over the last 8 months. We've now recovered more than 93% of the jobs that were lost so far during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Senator McGrath, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the Minister outline how the government will continue to support our labour market to recover from the once-in-a-century economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Senator Cash.
Well, thank you, Mr President. And the employment figures released today, they do show that underlying economic strength, and they do show that the labour market in Australia is now responding and jobs are being added. But we still know, and the Prime Minister often says, things are difficult. they are still difficult for many Australians, and they will continue to be difficult for some time. But that is why the Morrison government, in the first place, put in place policies that enabled employers to keep their employees connected to their employment, and that was, of course, the JobKeeper policy. We also put in place the Supporting Apprentices and Trainees Wage Subsidy, which kept those apprentices and trainees on the job where we needed them to be. And now we're in 2021 and we have our $74 billion JobMaker plan. That is now going to build on the success of the programs and actually ensure that we allow businesses to bring on additional people into their workplaces. And that's what we're doing, putting in place the economic policies to support businesses
Senator Cash,
and
time
employees.
for the answer has expired. Senator McGrath, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to have devastating impacts around the world, why should Australians have confidence in the resilience of our labour market and the potential of our economic recovery?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, while there is a long road ahead, as we know, Australia is well positioned. And certainly, if you look at the research by Deloitte Access Economics, they noted that Australia is just 1 out of 5 nations to enter 21 very well placed, with our economy bouncing back and actually even outperforming expectations. So what we've actually seen, job ads, ATL payroll data, business confidence and consumer confidence return to pre-COVID levels. And despite the impacts of COVID-19, the latest ABS data shows us that an additional 46,000 businesses were training over the year to June 2020. What we've also seen, deferred loan payments have resumed by households and small businesses, new dwelling approvals, new house sales, they are all increasing. And that is because the right suite of policies was put in place by the Morrison government, and that's what we'll continue to do, to keep businesses in business and people in work.
Senator Cash. Senator Kitching.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister confirm that from July to December last year, while Australia was in recession, NBN doled out bonuses to its executives, management and staff worth $78 million?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, I believe that Senator Kitching is quoting from documents published by NBN Co. As the senator would know, NBN Co is a government business enterprise established under a framework put through this parliament by the former government at the time in terms of its operation and its structure and the fact that it operates according to commercial practices and principles under those arrangements rather than standard public sector practices and principles. I'm advised that a large proportion of the number quoted in the media today goes to a very large number of staff across NBN under the terms of their employment. Under those terms that those staff negotiated, there is a base rate of pay and there is an at-risk element, and that at-risk element requires certain benchmarks to be met in terms of receipt of that at-risk component. Now, in relation to government business enterprises, I have, as the Minister for Finance, written to all GBEs, informing them of government expectations around the new wages policy that was announced on 13 November 2020, and requiring them and asking them, to the extent practicable and commensurate with their commercial and competitive circumstances and the legal frameworks within which they operate under laws of this country, that they implement a 6-month wage increase deferral decision, that they ensure new agreements only allow annual wage increases up to the percentage change of the annual seasonally adjusted wage price index, and that they consult shareholder ministers and the APS Commissioner before commencing any future wage negotiations. It's the expectation of the government that where agencies have access to bonus arrangements, they should exercise restraint to the furthest extent possible in keeping with community expectations.
Senator Kitching, a supplementary question.
And Mr President, through you, it wasn't published by NBN. It had to be dragged out of them in a response to a quan, and it was 47 days overdue. So Could I ask a supplementary? How did Mr Morrison allow $78 million of taxpayer money to be spent on bonuses at a time when 1 million Australians were unemployed? Is he going to ask for the money back?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr President, you know what? I suspect that if NBN Co had decided to ignore the contractual terms of employment that they have entered into with their employees, that Senator Kitching and all of the other old union reps across there would have been complaining about the fact that a government instrumentality had decided unilaterally to tear up its employment contracts. So we have a large number of NBN Co workers who are employed under terms where certain benchmarks have to be met for them to receive certain wage payments. We have simply met the legal contractual obligations. NBN Co has met those legal contractual obligations, and I have no doubt that all of the union representatives over there would have been the first to complain if a government instrumentality, if a government business enterprise had actually torn up any of those contractual arrangements between the employer and the employee.
Senator Kitching, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President.
Order.
Given that Australia is ranked 61st in the world for fixed-line broadband, given that the cost of the NBN under the Liberal government has blown out from $29 billion to $41 billion and now $57 billion, and given that up to 238,000 premises still can't access minimum guaranteed NBN speeds as required by law, given that, does the Morrison government consider it inappropriate for NBN executives to be handing out $78 million in taxpayer-funded bonus?
Senator Birmingham.
No. Mr President, we've made clear that we expect government business enterprises to exercise restraint. We've made that very clear. But there is also a reality that, as I said before, those opposite would be the first to criticise, if those employers decided to ignore the contractual arrangements they had entered into with their employees. I have no doubt that if they had decided unilaterally to not deliver any of those at-risk components of payments, that NBN staff would have gone to union representatives, that those union representatives would have gone to people like you, Senator Kitching, and that you would have come here or to Senate estimates and sought to criticise the fact that employees weren't receiving what they had been contracted to receive, that we were in breach of those contractual obligations. So don't come in here with a hypocritical stance when we know full well you would have gone and argued exactly the opposite had the opposite occurred.
Order. 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 Senator Antich.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and the Arts, Senator Hume. Can the Minister please update the House on how the Morrison government's world-leading legislation is leading to commercial deals between news, media businesses and digital platforms?
I remind senators that the COVID rules we put in place do allow senators to speak from any seat. We put those in place. We put those in place early last year. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Antic for his question. Mr President, the Media Bargaining Code is a world-leading framework to address the fundamental bargaining power imbalance between Australian news businesses and the major digital platforms, Google and Facebook. The Morrison government has always maintained that the ideal outcome is for news media businesses and digital platforms to reach commercial deals. We welcome Google signing deals with Nine, with Seven West Media and with small publisher Junkee. Additionally, our legislation has led Google to sign a global deal with News Corp that will include not just Australian publications, but also those in the US and the UK, a sign that our legislation is in fact world-leading. But we know that without the threat of the code and its binding final offer arbitration, there would be no deals at all. In stark contrast to Google, Facebook has disappointingly shown to block Australian news and information services on its site. Facebook will need to think very carefully about what this means for its reputation and its standing. It seems that Facebook is taking a decision to remove credible news sources from its platform, callously booting community and public health organisations off the platform in that process. It's basically saying to Australians that if you're looking for credible news, then Facebook is not the place to look for it. The government has consistently said that we wish Facebook and Google to remain operating in Australia, but we also expect them at all times to comply with laws that have been passed by the democratically elected Parliament of Australia and indeed with bipartisan support for that legislation.
Senator Antic, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, how will these deals support the future of public interest journalism?
Senator Hume.
Mr President, the Code will support a diverse and sustainable Australian news media sector by requiring those digital platforms to pay fairly for the content that they use. Australian news media businesses can reinvest in the public interest journalism that is so vital to our economy and to our democracy. This is particularly important in regional Australia, where many papers have ceased printing or have closed altogether. Regional media businesses will be able to seek remuneration through a range of options, including standard offers, where digital platforms can make standard offers to news media businesses, and this provides a way for smaller media businesses to avoid the often timely and costly bargaining and arbitration processes. Or through collective bargaining and collectively engaging in arbitration, where the digital platforms allowing for cost and resource sharing between smaller and regional media businesses.
Senator Antic, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, what other measures has the government put in place to support the future of public interest journalism in Australia?
Senator Hume.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you again, Senator Antic. The News Media Bargaining Code is not the only measure that the Morrison government has put in place to support the future of public interest journalism in Australia. The government has steadfastly supported our media industry, including through the $50 million PING program to support public interest journalism delivered by commercial television, radio and newspapers, all in regional Australia. In addition to that, the $5 million to the Australian Associated Press Limited Newswire under the PING program, $5 million from the Regional and Small Publishers Innovation Fund to support 43 different small metropolitan and regional publishers, and a 12-month waiver of spectrum tax for commercial television and radio broadcasters worth $41 million to the sector. And on top of that, reforms to the regulation of Australian content on free-to-air television to streamline and simplify drama, documentaries and children's content
Senator
obligations.
Hume. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Payne. According to data from the Tourism and Transport Forum, the tourism sector continues to lose approximately $8 billion a month. It is now 38 days until JobKeeper ends. How much longer will the Minister make these businesses wait to outline what support the Morrison government will provide once JobKeeper ends?
The Minister representing the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And we have spent some time in the chamber discussing matters relating to tourism and the government's very serious interest in...
Order on my left.
Very serious commitment to the industry, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 impact on the industry. We've spoken, Mr President, about JobKeeper itself and the small business cash payments as well, which has sustained hundreds of thousands of tourism businesses and jobs across Australia. And I think, Mr President, and the feedback that I have heard in regional New South Wales is that JobKeeper support has been extremely important for the industry during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also, as I've said before, providing further targeted assistance to help the tourism sector rebound, to support as many jobs as possible. And that is in addition to the record funding for Tourism Australia, which I've also spoken about before in the chamber. In terms of our plan to create jobs, to rebuild our economy, including the observations the Leader of the Government in the Senate made earlier in question time. That includes helping to secure the future of Australia's tourism industry. That's why we introduced the Recovery for Regional Tourism Fund, Mr President, which is about boosting tourism in 9 regions heavily reliant on international tourism. It's about delivering those tailored assistance measures to help tourism businesses pivot to the domestic market. Those applications are still open, Mr President, until the 30th of September.
Order.
That is a current program. There is funding earmarked for tourism infrastructure under the Building Better Regions Fund, $100 million in that fund. That is about supporting the supply of new quality tourism infrastructure to drive that visitation in the regions. We are also providing through the Regional Recovery Partnerships program, Mr President, another $100 million of funding
time
there.
For the answer has expired. Senator Brown, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The Tourism and Transport Forum also report over 470,000 direct tourism jobs have already been lost, with modelling suggesting as many as 300,000 more to go when the Morrison government cuts off support. Why is the minister delaying further support when workers are losing their livelihoods right now?
Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. What the government has been focused on are those initiatives and continues to be focused on those initiatives that I have just described to the chamber, Mr President. In terms of the Relief and Recovery Fund as well, it also has components which include a focus on terrorism, whether that is conservation work and infrastructure upgrades. I've seen those in place myself, granted myself in Western Sydney, particularly in the Blue Mountains. Fee waivers in marine and national parks, funding allocated to arts-related organisations to help these important drivers and contributors to the visitor economy remain open. Funding for the Export Market Development Grant recipients, including those in the tourism sector, for the 2019-20 financial year. We are very conscious, Mr President, that JobKeeper has supported a large proportion of the tourism industry, and we are considering, as I have said before, the best way we can support economic recovery in the tourism sector when JobKeeper ends, as we know, at the end of March.
Expired. Senator Brown, a final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. What faith can the thousands of Australians employed in the tourism industry have in a government that can't outline vital support in a pandemic but can find money for sports frauds?
Senator Payne.
So, Mr President, I think it is actually
Order.
It is actually really unfortunate, Mr President, that when the government has worked in good faith with the industry, when the government has worked in good faith with the sector across Australia, and we are well aware of their concerns in relation to JobKeeper, but that good faith work, Mr President, has driven our provision of funding for the regional recovery partnerships, our provisional funding for the Recovery for Regional Tourism Fund, the work under the Building Better Regions Fund, Mr President, all of those things, absolutely because of our engagement with the sector, Mr President, and for Senator Brown to purport to say in this place that the government has not done that is false and should not be allowed to stand.
Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston. Can the Minister please update the Senate on how the Morrison government is strengthening disaster resilience of North Queensland?
The Minister representing the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator McDonald for her question. And clearly, as a Northern Queenslander, she understands the importance of disaster recovery in her home state of Queensland. So we all know, Senator McDonald, that the North Queensland cops more than its fair share of natural disasters, and I'm sure everybody in this place remembers the absolute devastating impact of the flood events in 2019, which left large areas of the state underwater. There is no doubt that all governments have a role to play, and that includes the federal government, in ensuring Australia's preparedness and response to natural disasters. And that's why this government, the Morrison-McCormack government, is investing in resilience measures that will ensure our regions, as well as our urban areas, are in a better position to be able to respond to any future natural disasters. And this includes the $260 million in joint funding with the states and territories to implement the National Disaster Risk Reduction Framework. This framework sets out what we need to do to reduce disaster risk, both now and into the future. The government has also committed $88 billion for a world-class disaster resilience and research centre. The centre will provide all tiers of government with advice regarding disaster mitigation and resilience building. And the government has also committed $25.9 million to the National Aerial Firefighting Centre, a centre that will coordinate our fleet of aerial firefighting specialised equipment that's able to support our states and territories, a matter that I'll acknowledge that Senator Griff in this place has a very, very strong interest. But the Morrison-McCormack government is absolutely committed to supporting Queenslanders, as we are across the rest of Australia, to prepare for, unfortunately, what will be the next disaster, because we know that disasters will continue to occur.
Order. Order. Order on my right. Senator McDonald.
How is the Australian government supporting our state and territory counterparts to build back better and continue our economic recovery?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, clearly the most important thing is that we continue as a federal government to collaborate with the states and territories so that we have a united response when it comes to disasters and disaster recovery arrangements. Often these arrangements are going to depend on the individual circumstances of the particular disaster, because we know that the Commonwealth will be prepared and has often paid up to 75% of the total cost of the disaster. But under these arrangements, states and territories have the ability to be able to build back more resilient buildings and services and public assets to make sure that they're in a better position to be able to withstand future disasters. I mean, a classic example of this, Senator McDonald, was after Tropical Cyclone Debbie that we funded a $1.85 million upgrade for the sea wall at Shute Harbour, so that it's able to withstand the tidal impacts of future disasters into the future.
Time for the answers expired. Senator McDonald, a final supplementary question.
Is the minister aware of any resilience programs that provide direct, tangible benefits to consumers?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, the government is working with states and territories, Senator McDonald, to protect Australian communities, and one such collaboration that we're working with the Queensland Government on is the Queensland Household Resilience Program. This program assists eligible householders, particularly in coastal parts of Queensland, to make practical improvements to their properties so that they can withstand and reduce the impacts of cyclones on their properties. But it also has the added advantage of having a downward impact on the price of insurance premiums. This $21.25 million program has helped consumers reduce their premiums, some of them up to over $300 a year, and we've also worked to strengthen 1,750 houses in that region to make sure that they are better prepared to withstand the impacts of future disasters. So this Queensland Household Resilience Program addresses the very issues to which, Senator McDonald, that you are asking this Senate to be informed about.
Senator Ruston. Senator Chisholm.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Reynolds. Did Minister Dutton disclose to the Prime Minister that he received a political donation from the National Retailers Association a week before he asked the Department of Home Affairs to fast-track the consideration of the association's almost $1 million grant? If not, why not?
The Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Reynolds.
If I could ask Mr President if I could have indulgence to answer this on Monday. I think I'd be in a better position to answer this on Monday. I will. No, if you can just give me a minute. Or can I take it on notice?
Yep.
Thank you.
So, should Senator Chisholm, would you? We could Senator Wong, I was about to. Yep.
President, by leave, I wonder perhaps if the minister is not in a position to deal with this. Perhaps if Senator Chisholm wishes, he could address the question to the Prime Minister. Sorry, the Minister representing the Prime Minister.
I'm happy with the leave of the chamber to allow Senator Birmingham to address the question. Would you like it asked again? Senator Chisholm.
Thanks, Mr President. Did Minister Dutton disclose to the Prime Minister that he received a political donation from the National Retailers Association a week before he asked the Department of Home Affairs to fast-track the consideration of the association's almost $1 million grant? If not, why not?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I know that these issues have been explored in this place with Senator Reynolds, as well as in the other place during the course of the week. And there seems to be a desperate attempt to seek to draw some connection that just does not exist in this regard, Mr President. Does not exist. The National Retailers Association has donated to both sides of politics. To both sides of politics. The Labor member for Griffith received donations from the National Retailers Association in the same financial year as
Senator
Mr Dutton's
campaign. On a point of order.
Point of order, direct relevance. The issue is not a political donation in its own right. The issue is a political donation being made to somebody who then fast-tracks consideration of a taxpayer grant. A taxpayer grant. I'd ask the minister to be directly relevant to the question.
I've allowed you to restate the question, Senator Wong. I will listen carefully to the minister's answer. He has 1:20 remaining. Order. Order. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, the National Retailers Association applied for funding, I'm advised, for a Protecting Crowded Places project to assist retailers to deter, detect, delay and respond to a terrorist attack. Noting the events that had occurred, I do not accept the interjections from Senator Keneally in relation to the notion of a conflict, Mr President. Mr Dutton processed this application from the National Retailers Association in accordance with normal practices.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Chisholm, a supplementary question.
Yes, Mr President. Has Minister Dutton received any other donations from the National Retailers Association? If so, has he disclosed these donations to the Prime Minister or his office?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, I'm confident that Mr Dutton will have met all disclosure requirements in relation to donations or in relation to any other commitments in relation to the ministerial standard and expectations set around the ministerial standard. Mr Dutton, I'm advised, in relation to the grant, asked the Department of Home Affairs to consider the proposal by the National Retailers Association that had been lodged by them, and I understand asked the Department of Finance to cost it to ensure it was suitable and value for money. It was a proposal to simply make sure that Australians in a retail environment—
Order. Senator Birmingham. Senator Wong on a point of order.
A point of order, direct relevance, and I accept that this is a question that has been directed to the Leader of the Government in the circumstances. I would ask him, though, on both this one and on the first, on the primary, they went to the disclosure to the Prime Minister. I'd ask him either to be directly relevant or, if he is not in a position to do so, to take those issues on notice, because they go directly to the issue we are asking about. Were these issues disclosed to the Prime Minister?
I've allowed you to restate the point, Senator Birmingham. I'll call Senator Birmingham to continue.
Mr President, I'm happy to provide clarification on points of fact to the chamber, and will seek to do so, Mr President. But it is also a point of fact, Mr President, that Mr Dutton went through proper processes in receipt of the grant application from the National Retailers Association, in costing it properly,
Senator Birmingham,
and proper approval arrangements.
Expired. Senator Chisholm, a final supplementary question.
Yes. Has Minister Dutton given discretionary grants to any other organisations or individuals who have donated to his election campaign or the Queensland Liberal National Party?
Senator Birmingham.
No, Mr President, I will take the question on notice insofar as there are any details that need to be provided to the chamber about grant processes, disclosures that have been made. I am quite confident that Mr Dutton has met all disclosure obligations under political fundraising guidelines, that he will have, Mr President, met ministerial standards that are required to be met around disclosures. but most particularly that in administering public funds as a Minister of the Crown, he has sought to deliver good public policy outcomes for Australia. And those good public policy outcomes for Australia include, Mr President, keeping Australians safe. And keeping Australians safe, be they in crowded places, in retail environments, in the type of locations, Mr President, that are crucially important in terms of the number of Australians who congregate, the threats to those Australians and the importance, Mr President, of ensuring that businesses are well equipped to operate in safe environments and localities. Mr President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice, and I seek leave to make a brief statement, please.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank the chamber. Mr President, I just wish to alert the chamber to some resourcing decisions being taken by the government around the employment assistance program. As senators all realise, some very challenging and difficult issues have been discussed across this building this week that may cause a number of staff to feel distress or need to reach out for support services. As people are aware, we have a long-running employment assistance program in place. I want to restate the importance of people being able to access that via the usual telephone line that is available. I also want to advise the Senate that at the beginning of next week there will be a number of councillors made available on-site in Parliament House for individuals to be able to access, and that I will make sure that all staff and officers are provided with details on these matters and urge and encourage senators to access those services themselves if need be, as well as those provided by the Parliament, and of course to make sure that their staff are aware of those services and the confidentiality provisions that exist around those services. I thank the Senate.
Senator